For decades, the most powerful intelligence agency on Earth tried to kill one man. They designed secret plots, funded covert operations, and recruited spies across the globe. They tried snipers, they tried poison, hidden explosives, even a cigar designed to kill the moment it was lit again and again. The target remained the same: Fidel Castro. To Washington, he was more than a rival leader. He was a symbol of a revolution spreading across the Cold War world. And yet, after hundreds of attempts, he survived them all. In the 1950s, Cuba was one of the most important islands in the Caribbean, just 90 miles from the United States. The island had become a playground for American businesses, wealthy tourists, and organized crime. Havana's casinos, hotels, and nightclubs attracted visitors from around the world. But beneath the bright lights of the capital, many Cubans lived in poverty. Large parts of the population struggled with unemployment, low wages, and limited political freedom. Corruption filled the government, and the country was ruled by a military strongman, Fulgencio Batista. Batista had seized power in a military coup and ruled the country with the support of powerful elites and foreign business interests. For many Cubans, the system felt broken, and in the mountains of eastern Cuba, a small group of rebels believed they could change it. Among those rebels was a young revolutionary named Fidel Castro. Originally trained as a lawyer, Castro had become convinced that the Batista government could not be removed through elections. Instead, he turned to revolution. In 1953, Castro launched his first attempt to overthrow the government. The attack failed. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to prison. But during the trial, Castro delivered a speech that would become famous. "History will absolve me." After spending time in prison, Castro was eventually released and went into exile, but he wasn't finished. In 1956, Castro returned to Cuba with a small group of fighters. They landed on the island aboard a small boat called the Granma. The mission nearly collapsed before it even began. Government forces quickly attacked the rebels, killing or capturing many of them. Only a handful survived. But those survivors escaped into the mountains. There, they began building a guerrilla army. Operating from the rugged terrain of the Sierra Maestra, Castro and his followers launched surprise attacks against Batista's forces. Slowly, the rebellion began to grow. Farmers, workers, and students joined the revolution. What started as a small insurgency was turning into a national movement. By the end of the decade, Batista's regime was collapsing. On January 1st, 1959, Batista fled the country. Just days later, Fidel Castro entered Havana. To many Cubans, he was a hero, but to the United States, he was becoming something far more dangerous. At first, the United States watched the revolution cautiously. But as Castro consolidated power, his government began taking actions that alarmed Washington. Foreign companies were nationalized. Political opponents were removed from power, and Cuba began building closer ties with the Soviet Union. This was happening at the height of the Cold War. To American leaders, the idea of a Soviet-aligned government just 90 miles from Florida was unacceptable. Inside the CIA, plans began to form. If Castro could not be controlled, perhaps he could be removed. Over the following years, the CIA would become involved in one of the strangest chapters in Cold War history. According to later investigations, there were hundreds of assassination attempts against Castro. Some of the plans were simple, others were bizarre. One plot involved a poisoned cigar. Another involved contaminated diving equipment. There were plans involving snipers, explosives, and even collaboration with organized crime. In one case, CIA operatives attempted to recruit members of the American Mafia to help eliminate Castro. The reasoning was simple. The Mafia had lost lucrative casino operations after the revolution. They had a motive. But despite the creativity of these plots, none of them succeeded. Again and again, Castro survived. The most dramatic attempt to remove Castro came in 1961. The United States supported an invasion by Cuban exiles trained by the CIA. The plan was to land on the island, spark a popular uprising, and overthrow the government. The invasion force landed at a place called the Bay of Pigs. But the operation quickly turned into a disaster. Cuban forces responded rapidly. Within days, the invading force was defeated. For Castro, the failed invasion strengthened his position, and it pushed Cuba even closer to the Soviet Union. Just a year later, the world came closer to nuclear war than ever before. In 1962, American reconnaissance flights discovered Soviet nuclear missiles being installed in Cuba. The United States responded with a naval blockade of the island. For 13 days, the world watched as the two superpowers stood on the edge of catastrophe. Eventually, the crisis was resolved through negotiations. The Soviet Union agreed to remove the missiles, but the event permanently changed the global balance of power, and Castro remained in control of Cuba. Castro ruled Cuba until 2008, making him one of the longest-serving leaders of the modern era. To some, he was a revolutionary hero who stood up to American power. To others, he was an authoritarian ruler who suppressed political opposition. But regardless of perspective, his survival became part of Cold War legend. For decades, the most powerful intelligence agency in the world tried to remove him. And yet, Fidel Castro remained, the man the CIA couldn't kill.